Good evening, everybody. So welcome along to the first in a series of 4 webinars that we're holding with the Farm Advisory Service. This is on the topic of managing people. Tonight we have our first topic, and we're joined by Gail, Ellis and Sophie Henderson from Greenburn, who have just appeared on the screen. Greenburn is a family business with 18 years experience in helping everyone from small family farming businesses right up to agricultural organisations such as NFUS, SAOS and Scottish Land and Estates. So they've got plenty of experience, plenty of examples to share with you tonight. So without any more ado, I'm just going to pass over to Gail and Sophie to get us started. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Jennifer. And welcome everybody. As I was saying just a little while ago, 8 o'clock on a Wednesday evening and you want to talk about recruitment, that's challenging. So hopefully we'll be able to share some advice with you and our experience over the last 18 years. We work for large organisations, but we also work for lots and lots of small organisations within the agri-food sector, right from one farmer working on his own to one small business that only employs 3 people. So what we're going to do is take a fairly broad approach to this so that we can capture something that will be of interest to all of you. On the subject of recruitment, I have to say, the majority of people that we come across really don't like the idea of recruiting people because it's such a false situation. You know, you think about it, you get people in to interview them. Normally, you're on your best behaviour, but you can be absolutely certain that they're going to be on their best behaviour without a doubt. So let's have a look at some practical ways of applying some of the recruitment sort of tips and techniques that we've come across over the years. Many of you, I'm sure, in your own lifetime will have had to put a CV together, and that's normally CVs are crafted to the job, but actually we prefer to see the covering letter. The covering letter tells you so much about the individual, and so what I would suggest is, however large or small your job is, ask them for a covering letter. It's really important. Because your CV will tell you how many jobs people have had and how they've moved about. But the covering letter will tell you a little bit more about their key skills, but importantly, why they want to work with you. And that's very, very important. It's also good to see that, especially in the agri sector, where we have so many health and safety rules and all the different standards of production, red tractor and everything, we do really need to be able to see that people can understand written English and actually write as well to a degree. And it's a very, very easy way of getting to see if people can understand. The great thing about a covering letter, though, is you can use it more easily than a CV. You can use it as part of your interview, which is really important. The interview process, though, is the thing that most people find the most challenging. And I have to say, it's not my favourite thing. And I've been working in HR for a long, long time. What we've often find is people go out or they go to Amazon and buy that book, you know, 100 difficult interview questions, and then they write down the top 10 that they like, and then subject to the poor candidate to all these horrendous questions. In reality, I'm not actually sure really what you get out of that, because probably the candidate's written the book answers to the 100 horrible questions as well. The whole purpose of an interview is to really get to know the person. You'll understand their skills from their CV and you can ask them some questions about their skills, but it's so important these days that you get to understand their personality, what they're like. Do they fit in with you? Will they fit in with your team, the team on the farm, the team in the office? And these things are very important. We get involved in many sort of disputes, and we do a lot of mediation work where all of somebody's been recruited and their personality just doesn't quite gel with others. So what you've got to do is think about how you can interview people and get the most out of it. Now, I know this may sound a bit strange, But we often suggest you go for a walk with somebody. Just if you're in an office, go out and have a walk. If COVID allows, go and grab a coffee with them. And if you're on a farm, walk around the farm. What it means is that you're walking next to somebody, so you're not sitting across the table, so it just doesn't seem so false. And you'll find that if you're walking and you're moving about, people will start talking to you naturally. They'll talk to you about their jobs, you can ask questions, and they'll talk to you about themselves as well. So don't feel that, you know, because many of the interviews you've had have probably been across a desk. Do your own thing. They've got to get to know you and you've got to get to know them. You know, actually, the reality is, this happened earlier this week. We had a very big farmer who was interviewing for, let me think, a dairy herd manager. And they had the interview, and at the end of it, the candidate said, actually, I don't think I could work with you. And that was the end of it. I mean, I think our farmer's still quite bruised about it, but what happened was the farmer was his normal self, and the dairy herd manager said, no, I think you're just a tiny bit too blunt for me. And it worked. So make an interview process not difficult, not fake. Actually be yourself. And if you are happy sitting behind a desk, please don't buy the book. Look at what you actually need from the role. What skills are you looking for? You know, what experience are you looking for? What knowledge are you looking for? And just sit and have a chat with people, because having a chat is just the best thing to do, because you'll find out what they're really like and why they want to come and work with you. I think, Sophie, you've got some horrid questions you ask people, which always make me cringe, don't they?
I wouldn't. Well, they're not that horrid. I have to say my personal, the ones I hate personally myself, tell me about yourself. It's such an open-ended question. Whenever I was asked it, I immediately panicked, because what part about me do you want to know? Do you want to know about me in work, at home? And you tend to then ask those questions back, and they're like, oh no, just tell me about yourself. Ugh. But I have to say, my personal favorite to ask in interviews is, what does failure look like to you? Because it has, yeah, but it has the ability to break someone out of interview mode, because for the first time you're asking them something they probably haven't prepared for, and they have to genuinely stop and think about what failure looks like to them, in a sense of work, or even in a personal sense. It's a great icebreaker to get people to be more themselves in an interview, and I think that's the critical part. Is you're not going to hire the interview person, you want to hire the person behind that. So a lot of the time it's just about breaking them out of the cycle of having fixed things in their mind that they're going to say to impress you, when actually you're going to be working with that person, that personality. So get on with that bit instead.
Yeah, that's horrid question. One of the ones that somebody that I work with a lot, he always asks people, what was the last book you read? And I always say, how's that relevant to anything? He said, I just want to know if they're intellectual and can read. I'm afraid asking somebody what the last book was that they read won't answer those things. Now, when it comes to questions, try very hard not to answer closed questions that only get you a yes or no answer. Try to ask open questions. So open questions are, how would you? Describe how you would do. Could you explain a time when you've done this? And it's always a good way to start. If you always start the interview asking them about some of their experience or their technical skills. So how do you organize your day? And if somebody says to you, well, every day I'm given a list of things to do and I go and do them, then you know what you're getting. If somebody else says, well, I prioritize depending on what's coming in at my desk at any time, again, you can say, well, how do you prioritize? You know, you've got a system for prioritizing. A great one that we often ask, if we have manual workers who do work to a list, and we interview lots of people like that, especially for farms, is when you run out of work on that list, what do you do then? normally I have to say we get a blank look. But so then it's a way of saying, well, what would you do if your boss was away? What sort of things could you do then, do you think would add value to the farm? So come up with questions that really suit the job. Please don't buy the books. You know what you need when you're recruiting. You've got a good idea of the skills you want. And so just go with that. Don't forget, though, that personality is key. I think we spend a lot of our time working with our clients where personalities have clashed and people suddenly don't get on, or there's a bit of a fallout, and it takes an awful lot of time and it can cost you a lot of money. So just make sure that the people fit. Now, when you think that you've got the right person, please don't just do one interview. Always remember this, it's really important. The person that you interview at the first session is always quite different to the person when you invite them back. When you invite somebody back for a second interview, and it only needs to be another walk for 30 minutes, you'll find they're far more relaxed. They know that they've passed the first hurdle, and actually they'll be more comfortable talking to you, and you'll actually see another side of them. So it sounds like you're going to have to invest a lot of time, but I can assure you it's really well worth it. Over the years, we have had so many people say to us, oh, he came in for a cup of coffee, wife met him, she liked him, that was it. We met him for 10 minutes and then gave him the job. At the time, the farmer's probably crying at the thought that he might end up in a tribunal. And we think, oh, please, why didn't you just at least see him twice? Because you might see some things that you don't see the first time. So it's a really important tip. And as I said, be careful about the personality. When you do find the person that you think you want to take on, invite them to meet the colleagues before you offer them a job. Invite them. If you're in a dairy, ask them to go and just meet some of the people that do the milking. Just see how they get on. How do they interact with other people, and how do your team respond to them? Because once you've made a job offer, I'm afraid it's very difficult to get out of it. But it's always better just to do this little bit of prep work beforehand, because it really does pay in the long run. Now, let's say you've interviewed twice, you've found your ideal candidate, you're really chuffed to bits with yourself, you've put all this effort in and you think, great. Now, let's just go on to probably what is a really boring bit, actually, when you come to make a job offer. Now, references. The agri-world in Scotland's really quite small. Do you know something? Pick up the phone, really pick up the phone, and find, if you know somebody on the farm where the person's worked before, just pick up the phone. The amount of times that we've picked up the phone on behalf of our clients and we've heard, oh, he's in late every day, can't get out of bed, and we think, oh no, he's got to be up at 6 in the morning to do the milking. Or we get, you know, every time the football's on, don't expect him in on a Monday morning. Or, oh, he's got a bad back, he's had it for years, can't pick up anything, can't stand on, can't climb up things. It's that little bits of information that are critically important. And as I said, it's a very, very small world, but actually there will be somebody that knows them. Legally, if you ask for a written reference, you will literally only be given the dates, the dates that the person from to that they work with the ex-employer, what their job title was, did they have any sickness issues. That'll be yes and no, and most of the time it's no. Sometimes you'll be able to ask what their previous salary was and get that. And the critical question at the bottom is always, would you re-employ? Most people say yes, even though quite often they mean no. So the phone call is really important, especially I think in smaller farms where you're going to be very dependent on the person. It's really good to do this homework. Then we've got some legal stuff around contracts. Sophie, do you just want to pick that up, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So contracts, obviously, we're well aware that many farms don't have contracts in place, and that's just been a historic thing. Agriculture isn't known for being top of the ranks for having contracts in place. The one thing about a contract is that it gives us the ability to expand and restrict certain clauses within the working environment. We can put in clauses such as a variation clause, which allows you to adjust the person's hours or pay rate or sickness or any other additional payment clauses with a month's notice, 2 weeks notice. It allows us to be really specific that if your business has seasons, so you're very, very busy in the summer perhaps and not busy over the winter or vice versa, that you have short-term layoff clauses to give you the ability to reduce your staff when you need to. These things aren't implied clauses. A court or tribunal would never imply them. They're express only. So the contract allows us to express those. The second piece of news is that if you are found not to have a contract for any reason, you know, many of you might not have contracts in place and it's never been an issue. Let's put it into the perspective that it is an issue at this point. There's a hefty little fine that can go along with not having a contract. I think the minimum is £400. And actually that has increased in more recent years purely because in April 2020 there was significant employment law changes following the announcement, you know, following all the ifs, buts and maybes of Brexit. And so that caused a lot of changes, not only in employment law, but everything that relates to agriculture as well. That also meant you have to give a contract on day one of employment. Previously, you'd been given a 2-month leeway for this. This is now not the case. So we are aware that some of you may not have contracts in place. When I flick to the next slide in a second, we've actually put up a link for a basic contract that the Agricultural Wages Board actually provides. So if you don't have one, this is a really easy way of getting a template and just putting into your business to start a process. I think as well, moving on from contracts really briefly, because I think it's really important.
Can I just put in? So
yes.
Can I just? Sorry, I just want to say something that we've been working on this week, all to do with contracts, is we had one of our clients phone us. Somebody had left them, somebody very disenfranchised and fairly quite angry with it's quite a large farmer with the farmer. They went to the Agricultural Wages Board and said that they didn't have a contract, and nor did the other 32 people working on the farm have one. The Wages Board have now said that they're going to look into it. So potentially this farmer is not going to get a fine for around £400 for one person. He's going to get it for all those people. So Sophie said there is a link which we're going to provide in a minute for a very simple contract. Please do use it. Please do use it, because it's not, it's normally the Wages Board. People will report if they've just got angry about something, and it may seem quite petty, but actually that money soon adds up when you think it's not just their contract, but it actually will span out to everybody else you employ. Thanks, Sophie.
I think the thing with the agricultural wages order in Scotland is that it's not a simple document to read as much as we would love it to be, and sometimes, you know, your staff members can get upset purely because they don't understand their pay versus someone else's. They don't understand how sickness is paid, etc. Obviously there's calculations in the order to do those kind of things, but contracts allow us to stipulate those and explain that if you are making if you are enhancing any aspects, which some farms are, it allows us to explain where the discrepancies come from. Before we move on to just show you that link, because I know we've jumped ahead a little bit, I just wanted on recruitment to quickly talk about international recruitment. Obviously, there are a lot of farms that bring in internationals during peak seasons, fruit pickers, for example, and previously that's never been an issue, and going forward the government is going to make those lower ranking jobs still not an issue. I think they're going to introduce some sort of travel pass card. However, having done a project about this recently, the process of bringing in an international recruitment for a senior position, for example, a head of dairy or an extrusion engineer he was called, is actually quite complicated. It's quite a long process and there are several steps to it. So if you are, I think the one thing about bringing in internationals, if you are going to be looking in the next 3 to 5 years at bringing in any senior positions, get in touch with, instead of going to a solicitor, obviously you can do that, but the costs rank up with a solicitor in comparison with an HR firm that can give this kind of independent advice on immigration. Start to have a look at what your needs are going forward. If you are looking to, for example, bring in an extrusion engineer, this client that we worked with, I was brought into the process after he'd been offered the position. He'd been offered the position, I believe, in February this year. Other recruitment agents had all fingers in the pie by the time I got to it, and I was brought in to support the process of getting him in immigration wise. So the start of the process is actually that client had to become a sponsor. They had to have a license to bring this gentleman into the country. This guy was in Mexico. And by the time I was brought into the project, there's a lot of sort of ticks in the boxes that you need to do. And one of the most important ones is that the recruitment process was done correctly. I found as soon as I joined the process that the couple of recruitment agents that the client had used were using different job adverts. That set us back a month already because I had to re-recruit for that job for the minimum period of 28 days with the correct job description that had enough detail for us to be able to bring in an international and that ticked all of the boxes in terms of the qualifications and criteria for us to be able to sift that. Following that, we had to get the certificate for sponsorship, which takes minimum a month as well, because it only processes once a month. And in total, you're probably looking at paying out upfront about £10,000 to bring in an international, and that's just to get them in the country, pay for their healthcare, and pay for all the box ticking that needs to happen. This guy offered in February. We're only just getting him into the country now in October. That's the kind of delay that can be caused if you're bringing in internationals and you're not following a process straight off the bat. So we do recommend that if you are thinking of bringing in any senior employees, and let's be honest, the skill base in the UK, if you've got a head of dairy, you are not giving him away easily. And so oftentimes we do need to go international to find the skills that we need. So just bear that in mind if you are thinking of bringing in internationals. I think we'll move on to refine, Gail.
Yep. Just before you move on, we've just got one question through it, just that follows with the recruitment, if that's okay. Obviously we've got somebody to interview stage, but is there any tips you've got in terms of what you should be putting in an advert in terms of trying to attract these people to begin with? Because obviously there's quite a kind of lack of people out there.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Job adverts and job descriptions are something I spend a lot of time doing. The old method of a job ad was to essentially put out a note saying, this is who I need and these are the kind of skills, or this is the, I need you to work 9 to 5 Monday to Friday and this is what I'll pay. Those don't hit the mark anymore. The first thing is to, and this is the thing most people skip and the thing that I tell them off for, is to define your job description. What is, put a bit of your background. What is your business background? Not a huge amount, a couple of sentences. Who are you? So if someone goes to apply for your job, let's be honest, not a lot of Scottish farms and agri businesses or agri adjacent have websites or the best websites in the world. So, if I'm looking at jobs for a farm technician, for example, I can flick through those and I can see what the salary is going to be and I can see what the working hours is going to be, but I don't know, in reality, I don't know anything about your farm. So a couple of sentences: who are you? What do you do? Do you have you know, are you a dairy farmer? Are you an arable farmer? What kind of hectares am I looking at? What kind of size of herd am I looking at? And then define a role. What are going to be some of the tasks on the role? Some of the things that are important to you, and list them from in terms of importance. Don't bury the most important at the bottom. If you need this person to if they're going to be handling grassland management, or if they're going to be handling invasive species, put that at the top. These are skills that aren't soft skills. They're things that people have to have knowledge of before they come to your job. Also, put on a person specification. A lot of people forget this bit or drop this bit off, and actually I find it's almost one of the most important parts. You can specify what kind of person you want, what kind of experience you need them to have. Do they need to have a tractor license? Do they need to have experience in animal welfare and herd management? Do they need to be able to trim hooves? You know, specify what you need from an educational point of view, but also from a soft skills point of view. You know, you want great organization and timekeeping. You can't unfortunately say that you want a sunny personality, because that's a perception thing, but you can point out what things you want. Don't skimp on that aspect, because actually that is the thing that really attracts people. If I put up a job advert with not a lot of information about the job, but just the basic core details, versus an advert that's gone into detail about the job description and who we want, I will have 50 applicants to 150 on the current market. And that's evident actually in 2 recruitments that I'm placing in this month already. So it's crucial that you get those bits right. And for your area, know where the best places are to recruit. You know your area, you know what's best. Obviously you can go to standard recruitment portals, websites, Indeed, Monster, etc. Indeed, I have to say is our preference, because the costs are a lot lower. But if you're looking for a gardener, put adverts in the local garden centres. If you're looking for a part-time admin person, put adverts in the local schools. There's a lot of parents who are happy to take on a part-time role. So it's about really thinking outside the box of where can you find these people and how can you get to them. And I have to say, Facebook's a really, in terms of the social perspective and the amount of people on it, it's a great way to find people. I hope that answers it, Jennifer.
Yep, that's great. Thank you very much. I'll let you move on now. Thank you.
I just ask Sophie, apart from Indeed, what other social media do you use to advertise? You got
social media
very much.
Social media. I don't tend to use Facebook, but we have recruited through Facebook in the past. Twitter's a great form. It's because a tweet only has a 3-second lifespan. That is the reality of Twitter. I don't find it's a great recruitment platform, but it's great for awareness, especially in your industry, because you can get people to share it, pass it on. You're looking. LinkedIn obviously is a great platform. It's much slower in terms of its post turnover. Great platform, and a great platform to recruit on for senior positions. Then you've got the sort of smaller, lower grade ones like Gumtree. Gumtree gets a lot of flack, I always find, because yes, it does get a bit junky, I think, at times. However, for lower grade positions, it's got a massive job search market on it. And then obviously you've got all the standard recruitment portal sites, Jobs for You, Indeed, the web. All the papers are using a similar portal at the moment as well. High Jobs, I believe it is called. So they're all out there. It just takes a little bit of research. Certainly, I know in the Dumfries area they've got their own website portal called essentially something like What's Going On in Dumfries and Galloway. It's got a great job posting board. We've posted there several times, and it gets a lot of activity. Plus, if you post on that kind of thing, it posts to Facebook. So you can always find ways of doubling up your advertisement space.
Great. Don't forget as well to use your own network. I'm sure you've all got active networks, and often we find people, we do it ourselves all the time. We find people through our network. Somebody knows somebody and the word gets out. So be really active on your own network. So let's say that you found this person, you haven't had to knit them, you've actually found them and you're really pleased with them and they're about to start work with you. One of the things that you must do, you give them your contract of employment. Something that you have to do as well is you have to make sure that they have the right to work in the UK. Now, I know this sounds a bit strange, but it is a legal requirement. And no matter who it is, it could be somebody with the broadest Glaswegian accent or Edinburgh accent, whatever, you have to ask them for 2 proofs of identity. Take a photocopy of that identity and then put them in their file, assuming that it can be a soft file or a hard file. The ID normally is best coming from a passport and a driving license. They're the 2 best proofs to get. Please don't skip this bit, because if you ever had an audit by the Inland Revenue or PAYE people, one of the things they're going to ask you is, do they have a right to work in the UK? And this is going to become more important, I'm afraid, when we come out of the European Union. So 2 proofs of ID, ask them for those up front, and then you're ready to put them on the payroll. Put people on the payroll for those that of you are doing it for the first time. Obviously, if the person's had previous jobs, you ask them to give you need their P45, which shows you their earnings to date in a tax year and their NI number. And you'll give that to the person, your accountants presumably, or somebody within your team that's running payroll for you. And that will immediately get them set up on payroll, and you can give the photocopies of the passport and let's say the passport and the license. The payroll people will keep them for you if you don't have the facility to keep them yourself. If the person doesn't have an NI number or doesn't have a P45, and maybe it's their first job or they're a foreign national coming in, then you just need to go on the government websites and they can apply for these things, and it's a relatively straightforward system. In your contract of employment, you'll be telling them whether you're paying them weekly or monthly, and that's a requirement for a contract of employment. So think about that as well. What's easier? It may actually cost you more if you're outsourcing your payroll to run weekly payrolls than it would be to run a monthly payroll. So think about those hidden costs as well. So they're starting work. Sophie mentioned a little earlier about when you're putting the advert together, about making a list of tasks. We know that most people hate the idea of writing a job description. We know that, in fact, and they write them and then they stick them in their drawer and never seen again. But it's very important these days that you at least have a list of key tasks and responsibilities that you can give to the person so they really do understand what the role is. We come across many times where somebody starts work and about 3 to 6 months in, they say, but I wasn't told I had to do this. I didn't know I had to do that. I didn't know I had to do this. We had a classic one the other day where a very large dairy farmer had taken on a young lady who worked on dairy farms before, lots of experience. But he didn't tell her that she had to move the cows from the field into the dairy. And in her previous jobs, that had always been done by somebody else. It turned out she was actually afraid of the animals. And it's very easy to make assumptions about things. So this farmer genuinely assumed that she, in her past jobs, had been able to move the cows from one place to another. He didn't realize that she hadn't, and it caused a big problem then, because he was, well, is she right for me because she can't do this? And she was saying, well, he never told me. So please don't make assumptions. We always say, just write down a list of the top tasks that you want somebody to do and sit and talk to them about it. When we're talking about refining and getting them into the role, that's really about making sure they understand what you want from them. And it's only when they start work and you sit down with them and say, right, these are the key things that we want you to do. And we want you to do them daily, weekly, monthly, specify, so it's absolutely understood. There's no ambiguity at all. And really that's what a job description does. So don't try and make something up that's very grandiose that you pull down from the web and it tells you, you know, you've got to write 3 pages in size 8 font. It's not about that. It's about a list of key tasks. You will then have the confidence to know that you've been very clear with them about what they have to do. Please remember that we all receive information differently. We process information differently. Some people are very, very good at understanding verbal instructions. Other people need to see it. They need to sort of sit and read it, and then they think about it, and then they'll come back and ask you questions. So you need to make sure that whoever you're taking on, you don't just tell them, but you actually show them in writing as well. And it's really important whether you're a production company, you're working in food, you're working on a farm, that they also understand the standards that you work to. Again, we ended up in a right pickle a couple of weeks ago where on one of the farms, a worker that had only been there about 6 months had been putting out some feed, and he'd actually spilt a fair amount of feed just on the ground. And the farmer, we got a call from the farmer saying that feed has been lying on the ground for the last 4 hours. And I said, so what do you want me to do about it? Come and sweep it up for you? And he said, no. He said he's just left it there. And, you know, I know it sounds as if it's common sense that somebody should sweep something up. But in this particular case, the young person that was there said that I spoke to them and they said, well, I was busy, so I was going to go back and do it later on. So it's about setting out your expectations and the standards that you work to. Most of you will be quite senior in your own business in some way or another. So set out your standards. Don't just assume that people will work to them. Every business we work in use different standards, different processes, different systems. Don't make assumptions, please. So when you're refining in the first week, please look after the people. Introduce them to everybody else, let them know when they can have a break, where the toilets are, all the different, where the machinery is kept, where PPE is, all these types of things. But also make sure that you say, if you drop that, I want it swept up straight away. If you go out into a field and you see a fence broken, don't just leave it, come back and report it, do something. If you're working in an office, and you know, for some reason you can't get the photocopier to work, or you can't log on to your system, or something you can't print out, don't just sit there, come and tell us and we'll help you to fix it. It's all about making people feel part of the team, and you need to do that really quickly to get the best out of them. It is time consuming, but it's really worthwhile. And I think the thing about it is we always say, if you do your list, please don't skimp on it. Just explain this needs doing every day. You need to answer the phone when the phone rings. We work for various organisations that have sort of customer service desks, and the phones have to be answered by the 3rd ring, or they have to be answered, you know, a response has to go back to the customer within 3 hours. Set the service time so that you know that somebody is working to your standards. It's one of the things that we see a lot where there's a difference in standards. You can even, you know, we've got one case on the go at the moment where the chap's been working for 5 years, can you believe it? And, you know, the manager said to me today, he's still not doing X. He said, I've spoken to him, and it was because this chap, the employee, thought that his way of doing it was best. And he hadn't been, when he started working there, he used his own system and he carried on using it. Nobody said anything. And, you know, all this time down the line, the manager said, yeah, but it's not what we want. And I said, well, couldn't you have said that a few years ago? So sometimes we all become a bit lazy and we just don't tackle problems. What we do is we ignore them and think, oh, he'll get the idea of it, or she'll get the idea of it. So please just make sure that right in the beginning, that very first week, you put quite a bit of effort into making sure that they understand what you want from them, to what standard and what frequency. You also need to introduce them to everybody else. And make sure, again, this happens a lot. We see it all the time. People are introduced to maybe the one or two immediate people they'll be working with, but they don't bother to introduce them to anybody else in the team or in the business. Try and introduce them around. It makes people feel valued. It makes them feel that, you know, they're really going to be worthwhile, and it helps you to retain people. Recruitment is an expensive business, probably not only in recruitment costs, you know, advertising, but just think of the time that you're putting into it. So, you know, if it all falls down right in the beginning because actually you haven't made the people feel welcome, then it's a tragedy, really. So I think make an effort. If you have a big company, you can introduce a buddy system where you've got somebody looking after them. But one of the things we find incredibly valuable is when new people come in, they see things through their fresh eyes. They look at your systems and they look at your processes and they look at the way you're doing things. We always suggest link into them for about first 2 weeks, maybe only every other day, 10 minutes at the end of the day, and just say, you know, how are you getting on? So what you've been doing today, what were your impressions? What did you think? You'll be amazed at the little gems that people will come out with. And they really will. They'll say, oh, I didn't realize that you did it that way. We used to do it this way. And it's at that time when you capture that sort of freshness of ideas that we all need, you know, we all need in our businesses to keep them moving and going round. It's also important, I think, for people joining a business to get a bit of feedback. So if, you know, in the first 2 or 3 days, somebody's actually done a good job, tell them, say, well done. Don't be afraid of saying just well done. You don't have to be fluffy about it and, you know, and go on and on. Just a simple thank you, great job that. And you'll be surprised how much people value things like that. They really do. Interesting enough, we've done lots of research and read lots of research on this. People don't go to work just for the money. They go to the workplace to add value and feel that they're doing something that's worthwhile. So please start off the way you mean to go on and spend a bit of time with them. The feedback's really important. It also enables you as well in those early days to just see how competent they are. So for instance, you'll get to see where they need extra training. You know, can they, you know, do they need a bit more support with the IT system? Do they need, like me all the time, Excel, more Excel training? I have not even got past the first lot yet, actually, but you know, using a process in a dairy, tractors, combines, do they need some more support? We always call training investment, because when you train people, it always costs money, normally hard pounds if you're getting people in to train them, but it costs time. So we always refer to training as investment. And please keep a note of all the training that you give to people, just on a, you know, on a Word file on your PC, because one day, you know, when somebody comes to you and says, well, you know, I don't think I'm paid enough, you know, I've not had a pay rise for the last year, and you know, and I'm doing X, Y, and Z. You can look and say, actually, we've invested quite a lot in you over the last year alone. We've invested £600 in your training. So it's just a different way of positioning a bit. It's really true, because most of the training you give will become life skills. You'll train them. If they do move on, they'll be able to use those skills elsewhere. So really, it's about making sure in the first week or two that you really look after them, that you understand, or importantly, they understand your systems, your processes, but more importantly, your standards of work and how they should communicate. We've got some clients that before people leave site on the day, they want a 5-minute, what have you done, what's outstanding, what do you need to pick up tomorrow. We've got other clients that want a complete wash up at the end of the day, and there again we've got other people that just leave and will catch up with you the next morning. So it's those simple routines that actually will make your life a lot simpler going forward.
Jennifer, is there any questions before we just finish up on retain?
I think time wise, if we just go on to retain, and then we'll take any questions at the end, if that's okay.
So I think we'll obviously move on to retain. Gail's covered the first point about asking for feedback and opinions, and actually a lot of employees, it's amazing how underappreciated the term thank you is. So many employees appreciate it in the workplace. And I think one of the important things is that if you have a middle management, for example, you have the herd manager, and they're running the team below, or if you're in a piggery and you've got a senior and they're running the team below, that you're not only keeping in contact with that person, but you're also making time to keep in touch with the employees on the front line. It's amazing how many problems can be resolved quite quickly if actually you're taking the time, not every day, not every week, but just carving out a little bit of time in your day-to-day to listen to them and not guide or restrict the conversation to things that are happening, but listening to their feedback. Another important thing is cross-skilling. We often find that in agribusinesses and farms, people are hired for their particular job, and training across different skills is something that is so important, so that if you do have an absence, which there are absences happening all the time at the moment, if you do have a retirement or people leave, because that is just a turnover, that other people in your team can carry on that job, maybe not wholly in the whole sense, but can carry on aspects of the job to ensure that your business keeps ticking over and doesn't fall by the wayside, or cause you to struggle and have to do this super fast recruitment, which never quite gets you the person that you want, because you're not permitted this amazing amount of time into doing the recruitment project. And what we've been finding more recently is, obviously Gail said, it's not all about the money. It isn't all about the money. Some people, and let's be honest, a lot of our businesses can't afford to constantly be giving out pay rises, can't afford to be giving out loads of overtime. You know, everything is very tightly run to our budgets. But what we can do, and what we found is really beneficial, is helping your team or your staff find a work-life balance. The farms that we have worked with that don't have a rota system in place that works in advance, even if it's just 2 weeks, tend to find that they're calling on individuals quite a lot, and there's very little differentiation between when is working time and when is time off. And for those for those who have families, especially young families, that can be a real challenge to them when they're working. And I know that agribusinesses, we're busy all the time, and emergencies come up, and obviously we need to deal with those. But even if you can implement, if you don't have one, a rota that works even just 2 weeks in advance, to ensure that your team are scheduled time off, so they can plan ahead a bit on the life front, and it's not always a constant worry that they're potentially going to be called in one day. They can actually plan to go out with their family further afield to the beach if we ever get a sunny day. And finally, obviously, we said it's more than the money. There are cost neutral ways to value your team. For example, Christmas, New Year is coming up. Teams that have rotas in place can work one on, one off, and they can actually sometimes even, I know it's an absolute miracle, but they can actually have sort of a 2 or 3 day break over those periods, because what they've done is scheduled the rota in, and they said, right, team A, half team, is going to work Christmas, but they're going to work solidly these 3 days, and they're going to pick up these additional bits. But on the alternative flip side, they're going to get these 3 days off over New Year. Not everyone is going to be able to manage this, but even just giving 2 days off together in a month, in a month like December, and saying, look, they're shopping days. I know it sounds pathetic that I've just said that, but we know that everyone leaves all their Christmas shopping to the last minute. But giving 2 days off together, or a day off, and saying, you know what, that's your shopping day, head into town, get what you need, those kind of things, which are cost neutral because you can balance out your employees, you will not understand until you've done them how much they are valued in a business. Gail, have you got anything to add to retain?
Yeah, the only thing I think is one of the most important things I think I've come across is make yourself available to chat, talk to people. You walk around amongst your workers or employees and just chat. Make them feel that they can actually talk to you. It's so important. You might not listen, you might not want to listen, but it's important to them that they have the opportunity to talk to you. It really is. And to me, one of the things that we find, I think most of all, people say we're not valued. We've got all sorts of ideas about what's happening, and they're introducing this change and that change, and nobody's asked us and nobody's spoken to us. Communication is critical in the workplace. In this day and age, it's absolutely critical. So if you are thinking of changing anything, just consult, ask questions, ask for opinions. You're probably still going to do the thing you're going to do anyway, but at least everybody feels it's actually easy to make people feel valued. I know we go on about the money, but it isn't about money. When people come to us and say, I'm not paid enough and I'm not this, and they haven't given me a pay rise, most of the time we know that there's something underneath that they're not happy with, and we only need to do a bit of digging, and it normally comes to the fact that they feel that something's happened and they weren't asked about it, they've got an opinion on this and they can't voice it. So I think it's one of the most important things to do, really communicate. So we'll leave it at there, and I think, Jennifer, if we've got any questions, we're happy to take them. If we don't have time, then we're happy to talk to people offline.
No, we've got a little bit of time. We want to be finished by 9, but we do have a bit of time, and we have had a few questions. One question we've had through: if you've got a new employee and they are maybe struggling a little bit with their performance, is there any tips to know at what point you need to work with them and at what point you decide they're not for you? How would you decide at that point?
Okay, if it's performance as opposed to personality, so they're not able to deliver for some reason, I think you do need to invest some time working with them, and certainly I would look to work with people over at least a minimum of a couple of weeks, just to make sure if they're not delivering, you can see that actually maybe they're just not suited to the job. Just remember that in the first 2 years of employment, you can let somebody go process without having to run the fear of an employment tribunal. So always give people the benefit of the doubt. If you think they're not delivering, just get somebody else to look as well. So to make sure it's not you and it can't be deemed it's you being personal, if you've got somebody else who say, just check what they're doing or watch what they're doing or try and give them some advice. And then if it's not working, make the decision and move with it. Please don't drag it on, because it's not to anybody's benefit, that.
Absolutely. I completely agree. With performance, it's about getting in there. Don't obviously on one of the slides, and something someone said to me in my in my line of work and in my history, they said, what you accept you should expect. And I was managing an operational team at the time, and it stuck with me. If you accept aspects of poor performance and you don't sort of jump right in there, just to even have to start having informal conversations to check out what's going on, you have naturally accepted that behavior, and it makes it a lot harder going onwards to unpick things like that. With performance, you know what, not everyone's going to be great at everything, and sometimes there's underlying factors as to why they can't pick it up. We know that in agriculture, as a general rule, there is actually quite a lot of dyslexia in agriculture. So understanding things and understanding information can be harder for some people. We naturally assume people can do the same things we can do. That is not always the case. So with performance, jump in there, get your hands in early on, because then you can make the decision on your own terms when someone is or is not suitable for you, and it can be done a lot faster.
That's great. We've also just had a quick question probably off the back of that, just about the evaluation process in terms of presumably ongoing evaluation, and that how that would work.
Yeah, absolutely. So this obviously this builds, if you have a job description in place and you have a task or duties list in place, you can build performance around what they're meant to be doing. So for example, I'm dealing with a client at the moment, their employee isn't passing internal sort of sales tests. It is an agri adjacent business, isn't passing in sales tests. So this client spoke to me today and said, well, what do I do? What are my options? And I said, well, the first thing we need to do is identify what the problem is. So we've got a problem with sales, passing these tests. Let's look into that problem a bit more. Let's break it down. So we're asking them to remember product details. We're asking them to then convey that to the customer in a communication style. And we're asking for compliance details. Which bit are we failing on? And if we've got issues with all three, okay, let's put that in a document. I love a spreadsheet. Not everybody loves a spreadsheet, but even in a Word document, just write it down. These are the points that you have to pass, and then build a time frame. So let's say this person, for example, they have to improve within a month. That's it, and that's deadlock. If they don't improve within a month, we have to be saying goodbye, because they are burning up precious company time, precious employee time and employer time. And if they're not meeting the quality, they're not able to sell. That's the reality of the business. So we have actually just scheduled it out today, and we've said these are the points that we need them to improve. Some of those we will see improvement on quickly if we can break it down and say what we want. Some of those, if it is, for example, a memory issue, they can't remember all the product details. Okay, well then we now know what the issue is, so we can specify it and say, okay, well, why don't you keep a small notebook next to you that has the details that you can just flick through. It's breaking down the problem. If we just say there's a performance issue in this aspect, it becomes a bit of a sort of gargantuan thing of how do we control it. Break it down and then work in steps, but give them a time frame, give yourself a time frame, and stick to it. That is the best way of managing performance.
Great, that's brilliant. I'm just conscious of time. We've got one small quick question, and that would be, how long can someone expect the whole recruitment process to take, from that first advert right the way through to actually having someone that you've not knitted, as you said?
That is the money question. At the moment, in the current job market, I personally, any recruitments I'm doing, I am doing them in 2 weeks. So I've got the job advert out for a 2-week period. In that period, I take all those applications and sift them. By the end of the 2-week period, I'm dropping them straight into interviews. Interviews can be done over, obviously, we prefer to have 2 interviews, and they can be done back to back to a huge extent. The minimum period of time you should be taking is a month, unless you are super lucky and you find the perfect person immediately. But there should be a period of recruitment, minimum a week to 2 weeks, and then if you've got to fit in 2 interviews, it all depends on your schedule as well, obviously. But time wise, for me at the moment, it's taking a month, and those are professional jobs. In going into offices, more than anything, so the assessment centre aspect is longer, but that's normally what it's taking for me. But every job is different. If you're having problems, I'm so aware of time, but if you're having problems with recruitment, don't just keep plugging away at it. If no one's applying or you're not getting the interest, take it down, rewrite the job description, reload it with a different name, go into your network, find people to share it for you, and ask people's advice on where you should go. There's nothing like kicking a dead horse. There's no point. If it's not working for you, if you're not getting any applications within a week or 2 weeks, pull it down. Something's going wrong with that advert. Let's change it, let's upgrade it, let's make it more exciting to look at or more eye-grabbing. Let's put a bit more money in on Indeed, put a bit more money in the budget so it gets more views. There's algorithms behind all of these platforms that sometimes we just have to take advantage of. But if you're stuck, come and ask for help. We are more than happy to guide.
That's great, that's brilliant. Thank you very much, guys. Hopefully, as I say, I want to be finished just shortly, so we'll just do a little roundup. Thanks very much to Gail and Sophie. Hopefully that's been very informative. I certainly found it very useful. As I say, this is the first in a series of 4. We're back here again next Wednesday at 8, again joined by Gail and Sophie, who will be taking it to the next step, which is to maximise and motivate. So you've got these staff, you're going to keep them. So how do we maximise the staff that we've got already and motivate them to make sure you've got the best team working for you?